G'day ladies and gents, Cubic Meter here. Last week some of you may be aware that Mojang dropped our first snapshot for 1.17. Here on Scicraft we immediately got to work figuring out everything we could about the new mechanics. One of the mechanics that intrigued us the most was the introduction of renewable shulkers. You see, previously we relied on mods like Carpet, which implemented a feature for shulkers to simply spawn within end cities, in the same way that witches spawn within a witch hut. And so, on Almenga's Patreon server for example, we have this spawning based shulker farm to get renewable shulkers, which we use for our mob switches and storage tech. And your bog standard mob spawning for shulkers is quite powerful because, as you can see, we have a lot of shulker shells. With the ability to farm shulkers renewably, you have the ability to make something like a main storage like the one on Almenga's Patreon, where we're able to store every single item in 1.16 in shulker boxes. However, when I watch people playing Minecraft more casually in vanilla settings, shulker boxes are very much a rare commodity. So the ability to farm shulkers in vanilla is huge, as storage tech could become accessible to a much larger player base. So how do you farm shulkers? Well, that may not be fully decided yet, but so far Mojang has implemented a very interesting feature. The idea is that a shulker being hit by a shulker bullet will spawn a new shulker. And this bypasses a lot of the issues with spawning shulkers as you would other mobs. And this is because shulkers are unique, being a hostile mob that does not despawn, making this mechanic for farming them more on par with breeding animals. So let's figure out how to build a farm from this. Here I'm depicting a surface at which this shulker will never be able to teleport to the side of. This is a 21 by 21 by 21 cube. However, if I place a block here, you will see the shulker is capable of teleporting into this space right here. So if we count this, it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So that constitutes the 17 by 17 by 17 cube, which is the teleportation range of our shulker. Each time a shulker teleports, it will pick 5 random locations within this cube and check whether they are valid positions. A valid location is any solid surface that constitutes a full square meter, like the top of this trapdoor. If I was to instead place a shulker on any side of the trapdoor, none of these spaces are valid, nor is the underside valid. Also, if the surface is occupied by another object, like say this button, even though it doesn't have a hitbox, it will still be considered an invalid space, and the shulker will immediately try and teleport away. The shulker also will not like spaces where it cannot open its shell, like here, where it's sandwiched between these two blocks. And even blocks which look like a full cube can be invalid. Like for example the honey block, which doesn't actually have a full block hitbox. So if I try and spawn a shulker here, it will immediately teleport away. And it's the same for the side of this soul sand. However, the underside of the soul sand is a valid location. And of course shulkers will also consider air blocks as invalid locations. So as you can tell, shulkers are very picky about where they sit. This cutout is depicting the optimal layout for our shulker spawner. And this cell will bring in snow golems and fill it up to cramming limit. We'll place our shulker right here and use the trapdoor to control whether we want to run the farm or not. We simply open the trapdoor, now we're running the farm, and the shulker will begin shooting itself. Now this shulker will likely die, and I'll explain the reason for that. But for now, we're focusing on the fact that we need to keep snowball count up high enough to ensure the shulker keeps its shell open. Because if the shulker's shell is closed and it gets hit by its own projectile, it will take damage, but it will not spawn a new shulker. Meaning, if the shulker gets hit enough times with its shell closed, it will eventually die or drop below 50% health and teleport away. Now the problem with this layout is that there aren't very many spaces for the shulker to teleport to. And this is an issue, because every time the shulker hits itself with a bullet, it will attempt the 5 teleport locations that it will pick randomly in the 17 by 17 by 17 cube. And if it is unable to find a valid location in the first 5 attempts, it will simply not spawn a new shulker. As you just saw, the shulker eventually died. That was likely because it hit itself enough times without finding a valid location that it dropped to 0 health. In order to mitigate this issue of losing the shulker, we can simply provide more spaces for the shulker to teleport to. With this configuration, there is at least a 50% chance for the shulker to find a valid space. And given that the shulker makes 5 attempts, the probability of a shulker not finding a valid space drops to about 3.1%. This can be calculated using the binomial distribution formula, where n is the number of teleportation attempts our shulker makes, which in our case is 5. P is the probability for a particular teleportation attempt to succeed, which is 50% given our current setup. And X is the number of teleportation attempts expected to succeed, which, if we want to know the probability that a shulker will not be able to teleport at all out of all 5 teleportation attempts, is 0. The answer we get is about 3.12%. This means out of about 100 shulkers that get hit by bullets in this system, we expect at least 3 of them will not find a valid space. This unfortunately means that no matter how optimized the system is, you will eventually lose the shulker. Well, damn. I'm sure many of you may be frustrated by this if you've been experimenting with the shulker farms. But over here on Scicraft, we don't give up so easily. So let's see if we can work around this. What we want here is a system to detect when the shulker disappears and then sends a new shulker to replace it. And amazingly, this can in fact be done. Here I can just spawn a shulker and minecart it straight into the chamber. We have to make sure that we can then get rid of the minecart. So I think that should do it. There we go, and minecart drops out the bottom. So if we turn this on, yep, looks like that's working perfectly. So now, if our shulker goes away, we need to be able to detect this. We can't occupy the space that the shulker sits on with something like a pressure plate or string, because otherwise the shulker will not sit there comfortably. Placing some string above the shulker to detect it opening can also mess with the shulker block's pathing. Those shulker blocks will sometimes get stuck in this space right here. So that actually needs to be a slab. If we instead detect the snowballs coming from our snow golems, that will indicate whether or not there is a shulker here for them to shoot at. Yes, it works. So this means that we can have a shulker detection inside the chamber. So following this idea, here is my solution for a reliable self-starting shulker farm. So here is our on switch. Let's take it for a spin. wait for the farm to be active. Once this rail starts getting pulsed, the farm is running stable. And we will continue sending shulkers from our storage until our snow golems indicate that the farm is running. There we go. We're now getting pulses, which means the snowballs are coming in. And we're now generating shulkers. Here is our nether side where we collect the shulkers through the portals. We just need to activate the collection system here and it will start sending minecarts to pick up the shulkers from this platform. Shulkers will then be sent to a conga line where they get to burn off their portal cooldown before they get sent back to the overworld where they'll be killed and produce about 520 shells per hour. Our shulkers have started making it through to the overworld again. Now we use some special mechanics here that I'll explain later, but all you need to understand now is our shulkers appear at this block right here, and we simply suffocate them inside of a block, and that hopper minecart just makes sure that all the items get picked up without glitching out. These spaces here allow for some of the shulkers that we generate to stock up this shulker storage, and this storage will be used to restart the farm if we lose any shulkers. So here's where things get a little weird. Shulkers don't quite interact with nether portals as you'd expect. So let's say I go through these portals, where do I end up? There's a collection system and our exit portal in the nether is all the way over here. So what on earth is going on? Well, if we remember the conditions that we stated at the start of the video for a shulker to teleport into a space, you might notice that this portal here does not have any valid spaces around it. And what that means that when a shulker appears in the nether on this side of the portal, it will try to teleport. However, there aren't any valid spaces around, so it will fail. So where does the shulker go? Turns out, the shulker will retain the coordinates it was at in the overworld in the nether. So if we just look at the coordinates of the farm for a second, we can see that we're at -135, about 221, -91. Now, we should remember these coordinates, because we'll be coming back to them in a moment. If I go through this portal, obviously this is not going to be at the same coordinates because we've got the 1:8 conversion. But if we go to our nether collection system, right in the center of it, you will see that the place where all the shulkers are appearing is about at the exact same coordinates the shulkers entered in the overworld. Then setting them back to the overworld, we do the same thing. Minecarts eject the shulkers directly into this portal, and instead of going to the portal on the overworld side, which is here, they will end up all appearing in this one block space right here. So this is a pretty weird mechanic, right? You wouldn't really expect shulkers to behave this way, but they do. Now, you might consider this a bug, but it also has its uses. So this is one of those things that lies in the grey area of either being a bug or being a feature. Because Minecraft is full of things that were originally considered bugs, but turned out to be very useful features. But then again, this also defies our intuition for the game. which may frustrate many players used to the fact that portals result in a 1 to 8 conversion between the nether and the overworld. And there's no reason why this system wouldn't work just as well with the 1 to 8 conversion. But granted, some things are a little bit easier, some things are a little harder. For example, having the shulkers appear at the exact same coordinates, you might be noticing the shulkers will actually appear in the air. And that's because many of these spaces that the shulkers are entering the portals from are exactly at those coordinates. Now, our nether side collection system is made a little bit more complicated by the fact that the shulkers go to their exact same coordinates instead of appearing in a linked portal. However, using the same trick to send them back to the overworld, and we're able to force all the shulkers to appear in that one block space where we can collect all the items. So now we have a conundrum. Do we want shulkers to obey the 1 to 8 conversion between the nether and overworld at all times? Or should they be able to teleport to their same coordinates between the dimensions? Now before you decide, I should probably show you some more uses for this bug. What you're looking at here is about 800 shulkers stored within a single chunk. This is the overworld mob switch that we use on our Mango's Patreon server. And the only way we managed to get all of these shulkers into this confined space in such a clean setup is by using shulker warping. So what we did, we simply sent the shulkers to these exact coordinates in the nether, forced them through a portal that was blocked on the other side for all valid teleporting positions, and the shulkers would gradually fill all these spaces and allow us to lazy load the chunks and prevent hostile mob spawning whenever we choose. If shulker warping was not an option with this, we would have had to have nether portals smack bang in the middle of this, which would have been impossible to remove afterwards. Because obviously, if either player in survival went anywhere near this thing, it will essentially self-destruct. And so we needed a system with minimal infrastructure to get the shulkers in place. And that's exactly what shulker warping allowed. You can also still obtain a 1 to 8 conversion for moving shulkers through nether portals, but you have to make sure that there are valid spaces on the other side of the portal. However, you still can't guarantee that the shulkers will find a valid space, and therefore they might still end up at the same coordinates. So let me know what you think. Should shulker warping be patched, or should it be kept into the game as a feature? So there we have it. A reliable self-starting shulker farm for the 1.17 snapshots. Granted, things may change before the official release, but I hope at least we will see the shulker breeding mechanic remain as is, because it is a really awesome way to get renewable shulkers without ruining experience of raiding end cities. In case you want to experiment with the farm yourself, I will be leaving a world download in the description, and I will see you next time.